After recently damaging my wife's Jeep by having some unlucky sticks pop up and damage transmission lines, we installed undercarriage protection. Then I was putting on my snow tires a couple weeks later, and I noticed that transmission lines underneath my Hummer H3 had also been knocked loose from their mount, just not damaged enough to leak. So prior to this trip to the UP, I took the time to install undercarriage protection on the H3 as well. Interestingly, I purchased the undercarriage protection from Schwartzy, a guy who's been very big in the Hummer H3 community for a number of years, but I didn't realize he was right nearby, and so he was extremely friendly and extremely helpful. I placed the order online. He immediately called me and said, "Hey, why don't you just come over to my house and I'll help you install it." So I took him up on that offer and ended up with some very high quality undercarriage protection installed on my truck prior to returning to our land up in the UP. All right, so I've been on the road just a little over 3.5 hours. This is just a quick trip up to the UP. Chuck and Dan are going to be up there. Dan wants to do some clearing so he can drive onto his property. It's a little bit more toward the center of the peninsula. I want to clear the deadfall that I saw last time I was here, picking up Fred to recover Sparky, and then hopefully camp in the new clearing I created last time. And I'm also interested in running a chainsaw, doing a little more work on that clearing, and hopefully start marking and clearing the path to the lake. We'll see. It's a beautiful day today. It's almost 70 degrees. The temperature is supposed to drop about 40 degrees tonight, maybe more, and it's supposed to be below freezing most of the weekend. I drive up Michigan 35. I just am that much more awed by how nice it is just to drive along the lakeshore of what's really Green Bay of Lake Michigan. So I left this morning at 20 after 6. It's 20 after 11 now. Been on the road about 5 hours. Really not bad. It's been a very pleasant drive. It's a gorgeous day. And at the rate I'm going, God willing, and the creek don't rise, I should have plenty of time to set up my tent before the sun goes down. That's going to be kind of nice. I'm going to try to, for the first time, set up the tent in the new clearing. All right, just pulled off into the Stonington Town Hall to put on the limb risers, which I always forget to put on. And that's not a bad drive. Got here in very good time. So it left at 6:20. You lose an hour. So the equivalent of 12:40, so less than 6.5 hours. And that's about as well as this drive's ever gonna go. Without driving like a maniac, that is. Fortunately, just before I drove off into the woods, I remembered that I hadn't folded down the ham antenna. A little messy having the sunroof open. Do this out the window instead, just because otherwise I'm going to get a lot of garbage in on me. Alright, that's probably going to work better. But I've never recorded this before. Just kind of riding down into the land down Sandy's Road. This is the first time I pulled the trailer around the booster. So I really thought about that. And definitely the first time I pulled the trailer. Desire to be in your campsite. And just looking from here, it looks like a tree has fallen in there, so let's go check that out. Alright, well, that's good to know. That is one of the dangers of camping in the woods. That is not deadfall, that's a tree that uprooted. You can see there, it didn't snap, it just tore up its root ball, and it did so from the south, not from the northwest. So looks like before I park the trailer and camp. All right, and that's actually good to see too. So that low spot has, well, maybe it doesn't have standing water, but it is wet. So again, this is a very boggy forest. It's just dry this time of year. All right, so when I was laying down some corduroy down here last time, oh, there we go. There's an example of how you get standing water in these low spots. That's part of what's going to make it a challenge to establish the root. Why I'm going to have to use a ton of corduroy to do it. That's the bigger concern. So you're camping in the woods and you think, there's no wind here. I'm all sheltered. And then one of these jobbers gives up the ghost. So you can see there, whatever the wind was to that adjacent clearing, this fir tree came down and lifted this young poplar here. Can't tell if it was looks like it might have been dead at the time, but took it out at the same time, as well as that cut bit. I don't remember cutting that myself. You can kind of see, and let's see if I can get by here without having to step in these little boggy patches. And that's the thing about walking in these woods. That's how far I had to walk to find firm footing. all the way around. So there you go. So I have that on video somewhere of what this looked like, and you see how shallow those roots are. And that's the danger, particularly with the fir trees around here, is they're just not deep rooted. The cedars do okay. But yeah, if I'd been camping when that came down, no bueno. All right, time to fire up the chainsaw and get it out of there. Good news is the clearing is that much emptier and safer without that fir tree. All right. All right, that was just a few short minutes of chainsaw work. There's the top of that tree. Now, interestingly, that little solitary stub tree is the one that fell. So it's just interesting. That's why I always have to be super careful with chainsaw work. It's a scenario I wouldn't have thought of. Fortunately, it wasn't, it wasn't a close call or anything. I was nowhere near it, but as I cut it in the middle, nothing happened. But then finally I saw it raised after I cut off a log and threw it in one of the bog holes. And when I cut the next log, it gently righted itself. So I'm fine with it there. I mean, obviously that's not going to fall on anybody. I might cut it later to get the wood out of it. All right, so I'm going to pull forward here. I think I've got all the low spots managed. And then as far as I can, and then back the trailer there. Pull forward here. And then the goal is to back the trailer into that spot, which I think, despite that rather threatening looking fir tree, which might come down next time I'm out here, I don't know. But that is very likely to be the trailer's parking space for a while. It's a little bit of a high spot there. I think if I just pop the trailer on there, pop out the tent, I'll be okay. And this will be the new base of operations. All right, so that quickly evolved into a small time recovery. I did not notice this amazing patch of bog right next to that stump, and that's one of the challenges of me working in this forest, especially when the ground's not frozen. That was not a hole, and that was not me spinning. I spun a little bit, and in a short time that my tire spun, that's how much it sank. You can't even tell. I had the high lift jack, and it could barely get that tire out of the bog. I'm gonna have a heck of a time getting my base out of the bog. That's how much it sank just from me pushing down on it. But a log underneath the skid plate, front and rear lockers, skid plate in the front, because that wheel had dug a little bit, but also sunk. And I'm okay. Now, if I stay to the left, I think I can still stick with plan A, but I'm definitely going to look it over closely before I proceed. All right, this is the way adventures go sometimes. This maneuvering again in the bog hole got me a second time. Something I never had to do. I put a traction board underneath the base of the high lift. Had to jack it up twice before the truck went up more than the bog went down. And then I got that traction board underneath. So I'm not fooling around anymore. I'm going to disconnect the trailer. And no, I did not hard jackknife it, but I was just about to. So I just got back far enough that I was out of the bog hole, disconnect the trailer. Then I'll be able to maneuver the truck without the trailer. I'll turn the trailer around by hand and then just back the trailer into the spot that I want. All right, now this is not Alaskan muskeg, but I have learned a healthy respect for the bog in our forest land. After rain, you do not try to maneuver out here. So you can see where I identified high spots and put corduroy, it's fine. But anywhere that I thought was firm, like these are fine. I didn't put a ton of logs there because it looked firm. Yeah, well, it wasn't. And the truck just has to pause. So yeah, I'm really glad I have a receiver winch. I used it forwards to pull toward that big yellow birch, get me out of, I think, that bog. And that's just my tire rusting down in the bog. I'm really not like digging that, spinning. That's just how quickly this stuff eats you up. So Fred had mentioned guys have parked trucks, gone hunting, come back and been, sunk to their frame. Now I know what he's talking about. I'm standing here, this stuff feels perfectly firm. You park a heavy vehicle on it without putting, anything underneath its tires, and it will just slowly sink into
the peaty soil. So again, it's not muskeg, it's not that bad, but I can see how the water table has percolated up just because of the recent rain. So this is, it's too heavy for me to move by hand. That's the last bit. I'm gonna lift the hitch, pull it over. You can see the driver's side wheel on the trailer is climbing a stump. There was just no other way to get it out of there once I had realized what was happening to me, and I just had to get the truck out of there, then get the trailer out of there. But sun's setting. Have fun setting up the tent at night, but it's all good. I'm getting this out, and I'm going to camp on higher ground and come retrieve the rest of the gear in the morning.
So that turned out to be one of the more bizarre recoveries I'd have to do, where I actually had to use my winch to get my truck out of the bog, then flip the winch to the rear bumper to pull my trailer out of the bog. By the time I was done, I was exhausted. My hands were shaking just from the exhaustion. And then I had to go pitch camp as the sun was setting, and of course then a gentle rain started. But fortunately, no injuries, no damage to the equipment. I learned a healthy respect for the UP's version of Muskeg, and I just moved over to some higher ground on a sandbar that allowed me to have a nice safe camp without so much drama as the rain continued to fall.
Well, I guess I've learned not to trust the GoPro's battery readout. It said 14%. After a few seconds of recording, it gave off its little alarm and went to 0. So I got the next battery in. I'll charge up this one. But I was just saying, haven't done a lot of filming. So I got here Thursday afternoon, kept fighting with the bog where I intended to camp. So finally, with a lot of recovery gear, I've left the winch on the truck just because I don't feel like fooling around. But got out of the bog, set up camp up here Thursday night in the dark, and then it kind of started to rain a bit. But camp is all set up. Now it's this kind of biting, damp cold. It's only just around freezing, probably in the 20s last night. But I tell you, I'm wearing multiple layers, not fooling around, because it is just feels so chilly. But we cleared the deadfall off the trail yesterday, and then I went out and helped Dan. He's got some family acreage just up over the hill on the other side of the road, and we cleared some deadfall and this and that around there, where there's some very nice features up there. And then we just thrashed around in the woods up there a lot yesterday, so we're all pretty tired. So when Dan and Chuck and Fred are free, we're going to come down here, and we are going to try to mark the trail to the lake, which I will then go back later with the chainsaw and start clearing. So today will be kind of a big day. I'm not going to take the GoPro just because one more thing to carry. Have a compass, the iPhone, might take a few pics, probably do Gaia GPS, and pack up and leave tomorrow. But it has, again, it's been a wonderful trip up here. Mostly just spending time with Chuck, Fred, and Dan, and just enjoying driving around Escanaba and listening to them tell their stories from growing up here.
Well, if you looked closely at the Gaia GPS screenshot there, you noticed we didn't exactly end up with a straight line toward the lakeshore, but it was still a fun and good bit of exercise. The three of us, my brother-in-law Chuck and his brothers Dan and Fred, walked with me from the approximate center of our acreage west toward the lakeshore. Because we ended up drifting to the south, it was good. We got to explore an area other than what I had seen back in February or so when I made a similar walk, and we popped out pretty much right on the survey marker of the southern boundary of the property. All told, it gave us a very good tour of the area and a good sense of where I will want to put my trail in the future.
but I'm going to drive down now on the neighbor's trail to the lakeshore and then try and drive along the lakeshore. The level of the lake is very low, so I should be able to drive without any great difficulty down the rocky shore where our land is. Maybe get a little video and start contemplating where I'm going to establish our first lakefront campsite. So it should be fun. Well, unfortunately, I don't know that this deer realizes that this is bow season and rifle season opens tomorrow. So it's a Alright, so the doe should be safe. Yeah, there's going to be a ton of deer out here. Look at that, and then they got their trail cam set as well. Now, this is where the neighbor's road emerges out onto the rocky lakeshore. We'll see how this is going to work. I think the truck will have perfectly sure footing out here. I think it's going to work just fine. We'll know here soon enough. Dodge that branch. There it is, a beautiful lake, and you can see Escanaba across the bay here. Yeah, we do here. It's sure-footed. Some rocks and stuff. Kind of what I was hoping. This is really not bad at all. Okay, I zoomed out just a bit, just a little better span there. So there's the Hummer. Tires do all right on these rocks. I did not air down or anything, but I am driving slowly because they can be fairly sharp. But I think taking it nice and slow, even my snow tires seem to do just fine on this nice rocky beach, and it's extremely firm. So that's encouraging. All right, this is where we emerged earlier today, coming out of the trail. So there's a survey marker of the southern boundary. There's a little bit of trash that flows up and washes up from the beach. And this kind of gives me a sense of, keep sticks out of my eyes. It's nice to have some Carhartt duck material here. Some other trash that blew up here. An old blue tarp or plastic or something. This is where we kind of climbed out earlier today. And you can see you only go in a couple of rows of the cedars and there is no wind. So you can hear the waves crashing in the lake, but back in here, it's just peaceful and beautiful. Like literally, I do not feel any wind right here. I'm like just a few feet from the beach. Quite a bit of diverse forest in here, a little bit less cedar swampy. So that's what I have to decide. So probably come in here with the chainsaw and some marking tape and choose for myself a spot to come in from the lake, get up on this nice high bar here, and that's where I'm going to set up camp. Alright, according to Gaia GPS tracks, sometime last winter, right around here is where I emerged out of the woods when I started on our property at the eastern boundary and kind of thrashed my way through the forest. I probably emerged right around here. It's a little bit of a deer trail, it looks like. And here again, this would not be too bad a spot to kind of make myself a path into the forest. It's like an old beach ball or something in there. Find the weirdest garbage, like kids' balloons and things like that. Yeah, it looks like some kind of, those like Mylar birthday balloons people always complain about. All right. That actually looks like a decent little clearing area there that I could make short work of with a chainsaw. So this may not be such a terrible place to plan that beach camp. Find all kinds of weird little bits of flotsam and jetsam up here. Spot to kind of enter the forest. And bottle down there. Interesting. Yeah, this wouldn't be so bad either now I look at it. This might even be a better clearing. Yeah, I think I'm going to mark this on Gaia. Obviously, there's a bit of chainsaw work to do in here. Damage as few trees as possible. Start cutting up some of this deadfall. And that is actually looking like a really, well, this would be like a perfect campsite. So you just come in one row of trees, make yourself a little aisle. Some gorgeous trees here, some nice firm soil under my feet. There's another little spot back in here that is quite level, fairly high ground. And I have to kind of pick and choose which trees to take out to get the dead ones and make sure that nothing's going to fall on you. A little bit of birch bark hanging on that branch. I wanted to see what it was. All right. That is looking very encouraging. And the land on the other side, this might be where I try to make the path emerge. Looks like high ground on both sides. It looks terrible when you first stand here. You think, oh my gosh, I'd have to cut 100 trees. But like where I'm standing, you only cut the leaners and the deadfall. And the Hummer and the M416 trailer are so narrow that you can really just slip right in here. I am really liking this spot as maybe the best candidate where I can slip in from the beach and establish a nice little camp area in here and still feel like you're hidden away in the woods. Yeah, I can see like 2 or 3 spots where I could enter and drive down here. I'm liking this a lot. All right, so I marked that location on Gaia GPS as being the apparent best spot to establish our lakeshore campsite. You can kind of see my tracks in the lakeshore rocks. So from here on up, all I'm doing is retracing my steps. I'm now crossing Michael and Josh's property. That's Butch's son or stepson. And using the neighbor's road, which they were very kind to allow me to use. If I look on Gaia, I'm now well north of our property. But that is awesome. Short drive down the beach when the water level's not too high, and I can camp on our property. Okay, I'm off the beach. I'm just going to tighten one of the limb risers down a little bit. And I'm back on the trail. Let's see what Chuck and Dan are up to. But that was just absolutely wonderful. And it was so nice of the neighbors to let me use this road very, very well developed trail, and that is all I need to get me to the lakefront of our property. So I'm very excited about doing this spring, especially with the canoe. So that's a big deal. It's going to be a very, very cool adventure. Next time I come down, I'll probably pull the trailer with me down that lake rock with the chainsaw and kind of get in there and establish a place to put the camp. Or I guess more realistically, I'll come down with the chainsaw, cut the clearing, then come back with the trailer. But that was pretty awesome. So I don't know if the camera through the windshield picks it up properly. Pretty strong north wind and sleet. It's about 30 degrees. Fortunately, the roads are still, good traction. It took me until after 2:30 to get out of the forest today. Finally gave up about 10:20 or so and realized I was not going to get camp taken down in order to go to church and then head on home. So I went to church, came back to camp, and then it still took me 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. And that was partly me just being exhausted, poking around, but also the result of a camping trip in which you take out virtually every piece of gear you own. So I had to reorganize everything. Of course, when I get home, I'll have to clean it all up. It looks like I'm going to be hitting patchy snow, at least for this first part of the trip. Got a strong headwind right now, so hopefully for most of the trip I'll have a strong tailwind.